And welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show on IBM TV. Of course, you can watch the rebroadcast on Roku if you have a Roku stick. Big Mind Entertainment, you download the app if you have Amazon Fire Stick. You can watch it on YouTube at LA Bachelor and on Facebook at Pad Nation, Twitter, Pad Nation 2, Instagram at LA Bachelor as well. I'm your host. We thank you for joining us, excuse me, today. And we appreciate you checking in. You could have been doing anything else, but you decided to be a part of this broadcast. Want to bring in my guest, first time coming on the show. He is the founder of the American Union. It's a union of swing voters joining forces to demand a better social contract. And we'll get into what that is with Brian Winters. And Mr. Winters, we appreciate you coming on, sir, on the show today, sir.
Hey, thank you for having me. Pleasure
Absolutely,
to be here.
yes, sir. So, tell us about American Union, how you started it, especially, I guess, in the climate that we're in politically. Um, was it that was that part of the reason why you started it?
Oh, absolutely. I used to serve in the state legislature in New Hampshire, and realized that the system wasn't working for the average person, and you can see that in the polarization we have today, where people are all they're frustrated that they have to pick a team, Republican or Democrat, and a lot of people want a different choice. But third parties don't work. They're because the system is set up in a way that Republicans and Democrats are going to win 99% of the time. So the American Union of Swing Voters is a different model. It flips things around. And rather than electing candidates with a party and then trusting them to write legislation after the fact, we have crowdsourced a specific legislative package that ends poverty, ends mass incarceration, and ends the endless wars. And the deal for Congress is if they put it on the president's desk before the election, they can all get our votes. Republicans, Democrats, we don't care. We just want them to solve some problems already. But if they refuse, we can vote for their opponents. And as swing voters, it just takes a small percentage to be the deciders to control the balance of power in Congress. That gives us leverage, and we can force them to act and do something and look out for the American people. So that's what the American Union is. And appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
And what is a swing voter? Because, and it might be sort of a silly question, but we hear that all the time, just like the Rust Belt where people vote in the Midwest and those things. Are they really swing voters? Because most people believe, at least I hear a lot that the country might be center right, center left, maybe moderate, some progressives, to some too extreme to the left, extreme to the right. What is a swing voter?
That's a great question. And so we specifically define swing voter as someone who is willing to vote for either a Republican or a Democrat, because those are the candidates who win 99% of the time. If people are frustrated and they don't vote, if people are frustrated and vote for a third party, those votes are spoilers. And so by being a union of swing voters willing to vote for Republicans or Democrats, we can be the deciders. And that's the part that gives us leverage over the political conversation and the political process.
What do you say to people that say, "Well, okay, you're a non-super PAC," but in essence, if you're lobbying Washington or even in like New Hampshire, the state capital there, because politics is local and it goes national. But what do you say to those who say, "Well, you're a non-super PAC, but you're actually acting like one"? And how does the funding work?
So we actually are a super PAC that people can make unlimited campaign contributions to grow the union of swing voters.
Okay.
But as a super PAC, none of that money goes to any candidates or to their campaigns. It just goes back into growing this block of voters that are trying to wield oversized influence on the political process around a very specific set of solutions: end poverty, end mass incarceration, and the endless wars. You,
You know, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You can finish.
I was going to say, you might recognize those three things as Dr. King's triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism, because he identified them more than 50 years ago. They're all interconnected, and there's still problems today. so we can address them in one legislative package by coming together around this set of demands.
Yeah, I saw some of the principles of Dr. King on your website that you follow, and I'm sure you studied in terms of organizing and putting this together. Um, it right now, you look at a lot of the politics. It's around Supreme Court. It's around uh, police brutality, a few other things. Are those some of the other things that you look at in terms of utilizing the swing voters to get the not only the legislation you want, but in some cases, like you said, mass incarceration, the justice that you want?
Yeah. Um, so again, this is a legislative package with a specific set of demands. Again, expecting Congress to put it on the president's desk before the election in exchange for votes. And so there's about 50 different policies that are in it. There's an awful lot of criminal justice reform in it, a lot of police reforms, prison reforms, and prosecutorial reforms. Policies that have driven mass incarceration, so that we have 8 times as many people in prison than we did at the end of Dr. King's life. I mean, it's a moral stain on our nation that we incarcerate so many people. As far as some of the other issues like the Supreme Court and things like that, no, they're not addressed in this legislative package. While they are important issues, they don't necessarily affect people's day-to-day lives the way that poverty and the criminal justice system do.
But what about the local judges? They affect people's lives, right? Like if you're
They,
getting involved with that, especially if you have these hawkish justice judges that do put people in prison at enormous numbers, especially people of color.
yes, no, it's a great question, but this is only a federal legislative package, so
Okay.
we're sort of limited in what you can do, what Congress can do. We can pressure the states to reform their criminal justice policies by threatening to withhold federal grants if they don't. But it is a federal legislative package, so it's not doesn't change state law.
Talking with Brian Winters, of course, he is the founder of the American Union. It's a union of swing voters joining forces to demand a better social contract. They deal with some very important things, and I want to go back to including poverty, wars, endless wars, and mass incarceration. Let's go back to poverty, Brian. It just seems as though in the greatest country on the planet that no one should be homeless, no one should be poor. Yet these things happen all over the place. And you have these politicians that make these promises, um, and nothing seems to get done. What specifically in this package, this federal package that you have, are you looking for Congress and the White House to do?
So this legislation would enact a universal basic income, if you're familiar with that. So
Yeah.
every American citizen would get a regular amount of money, $1,300 a month for adults, plus $433 for kids, and that would be enough to lift every American up above the poverty line. You might know that Dr. King talked about a guaranteed annual income
Yeah.
at the end of his life because he recognized that the impact that poverty had, and that by transforming the poor into purchasers, they could have greater influence over their lives. And so in the 21st century, we can enact universal basic income. Um, and it's paid for in a couple of different ways. There is a 12% value added tax that offsets a lot of this. There's also some taxes on pollution, specifically on carbon and on plastic. And so the people who spend the least will pay the least in these taxes, and the people who spend the most will pay the most in the taxes. And we figure that for a family of four, the break-even point is about $250,000 a year. So if you're spending less than that as a family of four, you will come out ahead with the taxes versus universal basic income. If you're spending more than that, then you'll pay more in than you'll get back, and that's what ends poverty. Uh, there,
What did you get any pushback in shaping this? In particular, this president's, and his administration is patting themselves on the back in terms of getting more people or kids out of poverty, and then we can't. They can't even come to an agreement for $15 an hour, which is not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So what's been sort of the pushback, if any, with the policy?
So, as a union of swing voters, we're focused on policy, not
Okay.
on the politicians.
Okay.
And politicians love to get out in front of a parade. Politicians love to get reelected. So, great. Let's offer them a positive way that they can do that, by offering a positive message of solutions for America as we come out of this pandemic. As you just talked about, they let the child tax credit expire.
Yeah.
That we'd managed to knock the number of children in policy down to 9 million. People are patting themselves on the back. We've only got 9 million kids left in poverty. And then they let it expire and ratcheted back up to 12, 13 million kids. Not to mention 3 times as many adults. There is no reason why in America, in the richest country in the world, we should allow poverty to exist. It's a policy choice and it's wrong. And we can do better by working together with our votes and demanding specific changes.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Brian Winters on the Batchelor News Radio Show. Of course, the rebroadcast will be on all our um, outlets, and we'll talk about that and get into his website and how you can help and follow as well. Brian, I know you said you don't focus in on the politicians, but the politicians focus on the policies that they want to push forward. A lot of times has nothing to do with the constituents' reason why you're doing what you're doing. And I say that because, you know, we're all tired of war, right? And I think it's been, like you said, a Democratic and Republican thing where we continue to uh, occupy these lands under the quote of democracy. And war it costs not only lives, but it's also shapes the different fabric of the country in a negative way. We can't get over it. People get depressed and all those type of things. So what's the plan in terms of the policy to make sure we don't have these endless wars?
It's a great question. And you hit on a number of really important things. Like, the fact that since September 11th, 2001, we've had more than 30,000 former service members commit suicide because they've been so traumatized by the issues, by the things that we've been doing around the world. That, more than 75 years after World War II, we still have tens of thousands of troops in Japan and Germany. Still have, tens of thousands of troops in Korea.
Hmm.
We have hundreds of thousands of foreign military bases all around the planet, and our policies have cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. And so our legislative package does 2 things when it comes to ending endless wars. The first is reducing our global military footprint, so reducing the number of foreign bases that we have, repealing the authorizations for military force that were passed back in 2001 and 2002. If Congress feels that we still need to be using military force around the world, they are free to pass a new authorization. But the idea that the things that we said 20 years ago are just a blank check for ongoing war, that needs to be addressed. And then there's mandatory cuts to the military budget, 10% a year for 4 consecutive years. And so that would bring us down to about 2005 spending levels where we were at the height of the Iraq War. The second part of ending the endless wars is changing some of our foreign policies that cause so much unnecessary suffering. That includes ending the use of economic sanctions against civilian populations. So targeted sanctions against individuals and things wouldn't be prohibited, but cutting a whole country off economically is a thing that hurts the poorest, weakest members of society the most. And it's a collective punishment that is not who America should want to be. So to further improve our moral standing in the world, would also close down Guantanamo Bay military prison. It is the fact that we've had men incarcerated there for 2 decades without charging them with anything, really makes a mockery of what we believe we stand for as a nation founded in justice. And some of the other policies include prohibiting the purchase of landmines and the development of lethal autonomous weapons. Can give us a chance to be leaders in saying, look, we can find better ways to solve problems than escalating them. And last, reducing our nuclear stockpile by 50% over 5 years. And once again, leading by example and saying, look, nobody wins with nuclear war. Um, we're gonna take some steps back. So those are the policies that address endless
Let me
war.
just follow up with that. We see the situation in Ukraine, Russia coming in there, people are dying in Ukraine. Um, we have these sanctions against Russia, which could potentially, I'm sure, hurt their country. So, how do you kind of look at that? Because I mean, with the United States, my friend is my enemy is my friend. We kind of go back and forth. How do you is your policy? I heard everything you said, but how does that fit into some of these wars now that we go to NATO, we're giving, equipment to and military equipment? How does that shape go into that to the policy?
Yeah, good question. And it's all these policies are written down. You can read the legislative package on the website and AmericanUnion.com, so people can see exactly what it is. A couple of the more details about the restrictions on economic sanctions is that there are exemptions if it's part of a multilateral coalition or part of a UN mandate, or during war or times of hostility, then those restrictions wouldn't apply. So if we're you know, so it was part of a group effort. But as you know, we have sanctions on many some 3 dozen countries around the world, including many in Africa and South America, that are harming them, and it's not. You want to welcome people into the global marketplace and you make them part of the community instead of making them exiles.
It's a couple of the bullet points of your in mass incarceration I wanted to ask you about before you go. Um, Reform qualified immunity and Pell Grant eligibility. What does that do? Is that if people are educated, they get the Pell Grant, they're educated, they have less likely to be incarcerated, or just explain it to me?
Sure. Back in the 90s, as part of the Get Tough on Crime, Congress prohibited incarcerated Americans from applying for Pell Grants, despite the fact that we know that education is one of is a great way to help people be rehabilitated and not reoffend. It was punishment for the sake of punishment.
Right.
And so this legislation would repeal that restriction. Um, Congress is sort of doing this already. At some point in the next 18 months, incarcerated Americans should be able to apply for Pell Grants again, but they do it by establishing a new bureaucracy, and our legislation just repeals the restriction.
The mass incarceration part of your blueprint is great. I mean, these are things. If you look at what happened um, in many cases, in terms of law enforcement going in with excessive force, also people who can't afford cash bail, so they're stuck there. Then they wind up taking a plea, and they
You're
get
exactly right.
right. They
Yeah,
lose their job because they
yeah,
took a plea because they wanted to get out because they want to
yeah.
have their job.
Right.
Um, talk about that. Those are very important because it goes back to not just if you give them education, they don't revisit in a lot of cases in terms of prison. They can get a job. Education is going to help you get a better job, and you're out of poverty in a lot of cases with this.
Yeah, is a huge driver of crime. It's very destabilizing for people's lives. The ending mass incarceration is really important for our country. We after George Floyd was murdered a couple years ago, a lot of people, we thought that this would be like the wake up call that things would really change, and yet nothing has really changed. A lot of
Right.
these issues are just continuing to fester, and we need broad reforms. We need to get back to what the Constitution says. The framers, when the preamble of the Constitution, they told us 5 things we're supposed to do as Americans, and the first is establish justice. And we're failing to establish justice when 2 million of our countrymen wake up behind bars every day. So the police reforms include, as you said, reforming qualified immunity so that people who've had their rights violated could get their day in court. We would end the program that allows military equipment to be donated to local police departments, reforming cash bail, some of the prison reforms, reforming the practice of solitary confinement. The
Mm.
United Nations has said holding someone in solitary confinement for more than 15 days is a form of torture. And yet we have tens of thousands of Americans who are held in solitary confinement for weeks, months, even years. And this is a practice that needs to be reformed. And in 2020, when candidates were running for president, many of them came on the campaign trail and said, yes, we support reforming solitary confinement. And then nothing happens. This is why we're flipping the model around and saying, look, this is exactly what we want. Get this done and get our votes. But we can't count on politicians to make promises and keep them. So we've got to change the model. We need a better way to work together and to leverage our power to come together as people who want to end poverty, people who want to reform the criminal justice system, people who want peace, to come together around these issues and in one voting block that will change the political conversation in this country. That's
Yeah.
that's what we can do as a union of voters.
No knock warrants important. What you know with Breonna Taylor, that whole tragedy. Review prison sentences after 10 years. What if they unfortunately they murdered someone? How does that work? If
Sure.
they, you know,
Yeah, this is based on Cory Booker's Second Step Act. I'm
right?
forgetting, but it's second look legislation. So after 10 years, again, this is federal legislation, so it would only apply to federal inmates at the moment. And so after 10 years, they could request a hearing, a sentence review, and a judge would have to find that they had been rehabilitated, they were no longer a danger, and that the interests of justice would be served. And if the judge turned them down, they could apply again in a few more years, up until the age of 50. And then there would sort of be a presumption that after the age of 50, that you're no longer a harm to society. Victims would also have a say in the second look provisions. They would have the opportunity to weigh in and let the judge know, what they thought, whether they thought the person was still in need of further punishment and rehabilitation, or if they said, look, it's been 10 years. I think this person is reformed and nothing more can be gained by keeping them incarcerated. Let's help them become productive citizens again.
Sounds subjective a little bit, especially if you have lower court judges that want, or federal court judges that want to prove something, or they're just against certain crimes and no, and so that. But I get what you're saying, and I like the fact that victims have a say into it, because I think the misconception is that all victims say no, but there's some victims with compassion after a while, and they may speak on the perpetrators' behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Final question for you. Final two questions,
Yeah,
if I
yeah.
can. Are you endorsing any um, politicians that really are engaged and really sort of a partner with what you guys are doing?
It's a great question. Endorsements won't be made until October.
Okay.
We're giving Congress, as many chances, excuse me, as they can to enact this legislation, and so we will continue to build public pressure over the next 6 months to to build support for getting this done before the election. But in the last critical weeks of the election, we will make endorsements of either the incumbents or their major party challengers and throw our support behind them. And so here's the opportunity. The last critical weeks of an election are really important, right? This is candidates worry about an October surprise. So here's an opportunity for them to get something done and get themselves reelected by solving some problems.
You
Are
know,
there candidates along the way that, if they are supportive, yes, they will be known and they'll be, we'll share their message of support. But no, we won't be making any actual endorsements until Congress acts or doesn't act.
it sounds as though almost that um, your organization it sounds similar to the ACLU in a sense. If sounds really progressive in terms of uh, domestic, especially. Well, really, domestic and foreign affairs. You sound like again, justice and peace, basic principles, basic foundation principles that anybody can get with.
Yes. Again, we get our the Constitution sets out these 5 duties for us. So establish justice, that's ending mass incarceration, ensure domestic tranquility. The political parties just try and make us hate each other. They purposely try and get us riled up and angry at each other, and we can
Right.
refuse to play that game. Provide for the common defense. We have far exceeded the framers' mandate. Promoting the general welfare. Welfare means health, happiness, and prosperity. We didn't talk about it, but there's a public option for health insurance included in this legislation, as well as 18 weeks of paid family leave. And then securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We do that by voting. Universal suffrage is included in the legislative package, and the pollution taxes are a way of protecting the environment so that our kids don't inherit this mess that we're making. So the Constitution tells us what we're supposed to be doing, and we've lost our way. We can get back to it, work together, and build a better America.
There's a lot of course, we talk a lot about racism and social injustices, mass incarceration. I applaud what you're doing. Do you ever get Democrats and Republicans in the organization that may be Democrat might be a socially liberal, but a conservative fiscal person, and Republicans the opposite? Do you get any of that kind of clashing a little bit, or everybody's kind of
I mean,
on
yeah, well, nobody's supposed to like everything in this legislative package. Everybody has to make some compromises, the same way the framers did when they wrote the Constitution.
right?
Nobody liked everything in it, but they knew America was worth saving. They knew America was worth fighting for, and they knew something had to be done. And so they cobbled out, a compromise and a framework for government and kept the country going. And we, the people, can come up with our own set of compromises that will solve our problems and create a framework for Americans to work together instead of butting heads through the two-party system.
American Union, Republicans and Democrats divide us, as you just mentioned, and American Union can unite us. A group of swing voters, nonpartisan, and you have a balance of different, I'm sure, different races and genders and ethnic groups and everything else in there. Talk about the website and how people can check it out and actually support what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so a couple ways to support it. The website, again, is anamericanunion.com, and you can read the legislative package and learn more about the organization, sign up for the mailing list, make a donation. Again, we're super PAC, so if you struck it rich with Bitcoin or Wall Street bets or something like that, and now you want to disrupt the duopoly, great, we can help. One of the things you can do to help is refuse to play the lesser of two evils game. So somebody calls you on the phone, you're taking a poll, hey, are you going to vote for the Republican or Democrat? No, I'm going to vote for the American Union endorsement. I'm going to refuse to play this game. And as the candidates see that small percentage is the difference between winning and losing, politicians will find ways to persuade themselves that the best thing they can do is get that winning block of votes, and they will make whatever. Politicians love to win, right? So that's one of the big important things, is making sure that the American Union shows up in polls as we get closer to the election. And you can become a dues-paying member of the American Union for $5 a month, donation to the PAC. Just enough that we know that you're not a Russian troll. You got a credit card here in the United States, and that you want to work together to solve some problems.
Yeah. Well, I applaud you. I've been doing a lot of research and reading on your site, and if I was excited to have you on because like you said, they just want to divide us, and just speaking for a lot of African Americans, it some of us think when we're born, we're Democrats. And it no, I want the person that's going to look out for the agendas and the needs of my family, my neighborhoods, my states, that kind of thing. Not just I'm a Democrat because I'm a black and I'm whatever Republican and all that kind of stuff. And I don't buy, and I do get those calls too, by the way. Oh, you're gonna vote for so and so, and in North Carolina is even crazier. But
Absolutely.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing to you. North Carolina is crazy. I live in Fayetteville, and we've got a U.S. Senate seat that's coming up, and it's an open seat, and it'll be like a 2% block of voters that will decide whether the Republicans or Democrats win. And so by being that block of votes in the middle, that's how we get leverage over the process.
Two questions came in real quick. I know you got to run. I got to run. So you can answer these. First one: what do you think about getting rid of the electoral college? The other one is how can a successful third party be created when so many have failed?
Sure. Those are great questions. When it comes to getting rid of the Electoral College, you pretty much have to amend the Constitution, so it's sort of a non starter.
Right.
But as a union of swing voters, we can, it just takes small numbers of people in a few states to really control the balance of power, to control the outcome of the Electoral College, right? It was 11,000 voters in Georgia. It's like one half of 1% in Arizona, just small percentages. And so, um, in 2024, small groups of swing voters in key states can have oversized influence on who wins the election. Second part is how can a successful third party be created when so many have failed? I don't think it can, unfortunately, because the system is so set up in a way that only Republicans and Democrats can win. And
Right.
that's why the American Union is a block of swing voters that isn't spoilers, that is deciders. And that's how we can get oversized influence.
Yeah, you probably get a lot of people that are not in your organization that say, "Oh, you're killing my candidate, my Democratic candidate, or my Republican candidate. When you get votes away from my guy or my lady, it just is killing us." And all that money is in Democrats and Republicans' hands. That all that power is right there between the two of them.
Yeah. So great if they meet our terms, if they end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. Wouldn't it be great to just re-elect Congress? I mean, they have a terrible approval rating. What if they did something so incredibly awesome that everyone was happy, that we didn't have to have a hateful, polarizing election? That instead, like everybody could just celebrate that we have solved these problems. Like wouldn't that be a much much better outcome for the 2022 election? We can do that if we agree to work together. And so that's what the American Union is.
Brian, I really appreciate this time. You have been awesome, great information. We are definitely going to share this on our website as well. Thank you for coming on, and let's do this again. I really want to help you get this information out there, sir.
That would be great. I'd love to chat again sometime. Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
Brian. Yes, sir. Thank you. Good to have him on. Brian Winters. He is the founder of the American Union, a union of swing voters joining forces to demand a better social contract. They have a blueprint on their website, and it's very detailed. There are three basic ones: is to end poverty, end mass incarceration, and end the endless wars. Makes sense to me. Check them out. Again, the website is AmericanUnion.com. That's it for us. Again, if you missed this broadcast live, you can catch the rebroadcast on IBM TV. If you have a Roku stick or a Roku TV, you can watch it there. If you have an Amazon Fire Stick, you download the Big Mind Entertainment app and you can watch it there. YouTube, we encourage you to go there, LA Batchelor, and become a subscriber there. So we love to have you on there. Pad Nation on Facebook, Pad Nation, the number 2 on Twitter, LA Batchelor on Instagram, and iTunes. Tune in as well. Enjoy. Thank you for joining us. We certainly appreciate you. We will talk with you very soon on the Batchelor News Radio Network. And also, don't forget the audio version at thebatchelornews.airtime.pro.